Here from Oregon, tell us, how do you compare so far after 14 months? What's happening in the energy and the momentum related to reform in Washington State versus what you experienced during a transformational time in Oregon?
Well, and just to be clear, I came from Northwest Health Foundation, which is actually in Oregon and Southwest Washington. Yes. And so, and I was lucky enough to spend a big part of my childhood in Washington too. And so I consider Washington my home as well.
Welcome back.
And, you know what? I would say that one of the things I'm most excited about today is that one of my most dear mentors was one of your earlier speakers today, which was Governor John Kitzhaber. And so I'm so glad that you took the opportunity to invite him to be here. I think that the reform efforts are quite different in Oregon and Washington. And I think that the unique part of Oregon's story really has a lot to do with the leadership of Governor Kitzhaber and another leader who has since moved to Washington, Liz Baxter, who intentionally toured and visited across the state of Oregon to really listen and invite the voices of many communities to assist in designing and developing some of the models that then became the CCO. And so that's one unique factor, and I think there's an opportunity for this state to learn from that. I think the other factor is really an intentional effort from day one on governance and leadership and decision making, and some structural aspects that I think would be valuable to examine as the ACHs look forward in their own future.
Yeah. So I think Governor Kitzhaber is a transformational figure. I think the Oregon experience would have been very hard to do without his personal leadership there. I think the world of Governor Inslee, and I think he's done a great job on healthcare, but his passion is clearly not healthcare, it's climate change, unquestionably climate change. So without a figure like a Kitzhaber, how do we find the leadership to really drive significant reforms? We've had those here with Governor Inslee. I don't want to discredit that. But I guess I'll ask the question I'm teeing up, which is, what role does the Group Health Foundation have in providing that sort of community leadership to drive system transformation?
Well, one of the things that we have been most focused on at Group Health Foundation is really trying to introduce ourselves with respect and humility to our state. A lot of people hear our name and they have a really specific idea about who we are. And the reality is that we are a brand new startup organization that was created from the sale of Group Health Cooperative to Kaiser. And we're really proud of that history. And at the same time, it's important to know that we are not Kaiser, and we are also not Group Health Cooperative. We are a brand new C4 foundation that is statewide. We are explicitly focused on health equity, and we believe that the greatest possibility for this state is to truly invest and respect that the communities with the greatest health disparities actually are the greatest expertise to design the future we all want for ourselves. So we're this unique organization with a strong perspective, and at the same time, we are hiring all brand new positions. We are setting up an office, and we're in startup mode. So we've spent the last year traveling the state. We've been to all 39 counties, most of which we've been to 3 or 4 times. There's just a handful we've only been to 1 or 2 times. And we have intentionally decided that the folks we would meet with when we are fortunate enough to be invited into those communities are the folks who, no fault of their own, have carried the greatest health disparities because of racism, classism, ableism, and geographic isolation. And we've been inviting those communities to help teach us and to help us become a better partner and to help us understand what their visions are for Washington. And to your question that you started, which was really about leadership and the path forward, is that the thing that has been most striking to me as I've gone on most of those trips is that there are leaders in every corner of this state doing remarkable things, who have a very clear vision around inequities that they want to address and ways to get there. They are often not the leaders who are centered and invited to the table to make the decisions, but they are there. And I feel incredibly positive about that. So for us, we are an organization that when we are fully up and actualized, we will have upwards of 50 employees, offices in multiple locations around our state, and a robust grant-making program that is really unapologetic about systems change and building power, and saying quite clearly that we need leadership and solutions and structures that match who Washington is today and are getting ready for who Washington is tomorrow. So we live in a state where 1 out of 3 people is a person of color and or an immigrant. And we live in a state where 47% of all children who go to public school are people of color. And our 0 to 5 population is actually the most diverse portion of our population. And I think we need to imagine a state who is ready for all those people to lead and design the future we want for ourselves.
Yeah, interesting. Powerful statement. Powerful statement. So, good stuff. Let me ask this sort of political question, because the C4 status is super interesting, right? You guys got a lot of dough. You got a lot of power. Somebody was like, oh, I don't know much about the Group Health Foundation, but I really want to know how to get their money. But as a C4, you can be very politically active. You can be as politically active as you want, unlike a C3. Is a political pathway central to your long-term strategic plan in order to effectuate those reforms to prepare our state? Or do you see yourself, does the foundation see itself as maybe a more community-minded or maybe a more nuanced organization? How would you characterize that?
Well, we're very excited to be a C4, and I come from an organization that was also a C4, and it's pretty rare. It's rather unique to have a philanthropic C4 entity. And so I think we are learning and growing and building infrastructure so that we can use all the tools at our disposal. Oftentimes, philanthropy attempts to behave in a way or communicate that it's neutral. And actually being neutral is actually being quite political in itself. And so the place we're in today is to acknowledge and honor and recognize that we do have power. And also to recognize that there's not a decision that is made in this state or in a local community that is not in fact political. And so we want to be honest about that. And we are deep in our work, really looking at and understanding the context of this state, looking at what communities have C4 infrastructures and which communities don't. You will not be surprised to find that many of the very communities who have the greatest health disparities have the least access to civic engagement resources, political power building, and resources to lobby and advocate for their voices. And so we're paying very close attention to that. We made our first overt endorsement and contribution this year to the I-1000 campaign. And we did that because after we had traveled the state and listened to communities, we had heard so loud and clearly that folks across this state are impacted every single day by lack of representation, lack of opportunity, and being excluded from the incredible wealth and access and opportunity that this state currently has. And so we felt like after all those conversations, there was no way for us to not take a stand. And it was also one of the few ballot measures that we could have passed that could have improved the lives of millions of Washingtonians. And so we made that contribution quite proudly. We made it understanding fully that it would be very, very difficult to win. We lost by 15,000 votes. But we hope it was one way where we could show that we are an organization that wants to support communities when they are clear that they care about an issue.
I I think if we are lucky and honored enough to be here 10 years from now, it's very possible that I will look back and say in the last 10 years in Washington State, the most impactful disruptive force for system reform here was the Group Health Foundation. That'll mean you're going to break some China, you're going to make some colorful relationships, but I think we all wish you the best of luck. So Nichole Maher, President or CEO of the Group Health Foundation, thank you, man, for doing this.
Thank you.